Tanny Games here. Welcome back to the channel. Back here with another video today, this time talking about the potential additional character that will be coming in the Rift in Time DLC, which releases sometime soonish. The release date is scheduled for spring, but there isn't any confirmed date yet. My own speculations are in May, but you know, yeah, we won't go too much into that. That's unrelated to this video. But yeah, I guess the things that I wanted to talk about was my own theories that other people have been discussing and things like that. And you may tell from the background behind me that we're going to mainly be talking about Oswald and Figment. Now, I've heard a lot of other theories for other characters, Aladdin, Genie. In fact, they're probably the main other characters that get talked about, and honestly, I don't think it's them. I genuinely don't think it's them. I think if we're getting an additional character, it is between these two, Oswald and Figment. I feel like they're the two characters that have the biggest hints or the biggest connection to potentially be the next character we get in the Rift in Time DLC. So my initial thoughts and my theory, and something that I've said for a long time, is that what's going to be coming, or who's going to be coming, is Oswald. Now, I still stand by that. I am hoping it's going to be Oswald. If it's not, then, you know, it's not. But I would love for my theory to be correct. I was correct when there was the whole debate between Vanellope and Cinderella. So I'd like to continue my track record of being correct. So yeah, I am hoping that it's Oswald. I feel like, you know what? Why don't we just get into it and I'll talk about Oswald first. So my main I think biggest clue or indicator is the fact that Oswald is literally called like Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. So if we have a look at the roadmap, it does talk about a lucky character. So I feel like Game Lost hints are very, very on the nose when it comes to things like this. So if we think back to when Vanellope was added, the tagline for her before it was revealed that it was Vanellope was "A princess races into the valley." It is very specific. I mean, Vanellope literally races. That's her entire character. And I know there was a lot of people theorizing that it could be Cinderella because she races against the clock, but she doesn't really race against the clock. She just gets to 12 and realizes, oh, the spell's going to be broken. I need to leave. She's not racing against the clock as such, I wouldn't say. I do get where that theory comes from, but I just feel like it isn't a theory that I feel holds a lot of pull or strength. So when in this expansion pass roadmap, or content roadmap I should say, talks about the next part of the DLC, it says explore Ancient's Landing to uncover more of its secrets and befriend a very lucky villager. And I do feel like Oswald fits that. He is the lucky rabbit. He's like, his name is synonymous with being lucky, I guess you could say, because it's literally in the title. And one thing I want to talk about is the fact that there are technically two roadmaps. Now, both of these roadmaps came down at the same time, I just want to specify. There was a separate roadmap just focusing on the expansion pass, and then there was a combined content roadmap which showed the free update stuff and the DLC stuff. Now, in the combined content roadmap, there is no reference to the title, The Spark of Imagination. So if we look at the expansion pass roadmap, it says the spark of imagination, spring 2024, explore Ancient's Landing to uncover more of its secrets and befriend a lucky villager. But when we look at this content roadmap, which combines the free stuff and the expansion pass stuff, all it says is spring 2024, explore Ancient's Landing to uncover more of its secrets and befriend a very lucky villager. Now, because these like roadmaps came down at like the same time, they knew the titles. It's not like it's a new thing, this title or anything like that. They had these, like, I guess, titles in the work for these parts of the DLC, these chapters. So to me, I think what that tells us is that the important part of this reference is the lucky bit. That's what's important. That's what Gameloft are focusing on here, is the lucky villager. Now, I do sort of want to stress that there are ties to luck with Figment, and I will sort of get into that a bit later. But I do feel like this is a really heavy indicator for Oswald. I do also want to point out that I guess Oswald is gaining a lot more in terms of like popularity and also sort of just general knowledge about him as a character. We had the epic mini games which focused on him. He is in Disney Speedstorm, which is Gameloft's other Disney game and stuff like that. So he's not exactly completely unknown, which I think is obviously important to point out. He is a known character. He is very well established. So yeah, and I mean, he's even referenced in this game. As you can see, I do have the motif on the canvas behind me, and then we do also have on the outfit that I'm wearing at the moment, we have a pin badge with Oswald on it as well. So he's even like, he has a, I guess you could say, like, a presence in this game already. Like, you know, he's on their radar. You know, he is very much considered a character and stuff like that. I mean, not like a physical in-game character, but like he's relevant to the Disney world. He's not someone that they're overlooking and stuff like that. Now I do also want to just tie into the actual like storyline. So Oswald is known as like a forgotten brother to Mickey Mouse. If you kind of don't know the origins of Oswald, basically Oswald is Walt's like first character he created. I believe he was created for Universal. So this was before Disney. Walt Disney had his Disney company, and he was working for other companies, and Oswald was like the first character that he created. And unfortunately, there was a bunch of disagreements and stuff. I'm not going to go too much into that, but basically Walt went his own way. He ends up creating Disney and stuff like that, but he has to leave Oswald behind, because even though Walt Disney did create Oswald, he created him for a different company. You know, he isn't he's a Disney creation, but he wasn't made for the Disney studios, if that makes sense, because they didn't exist. So he's often figured as like a forgotten brother to Mickey Mouse, which I think really ties in nicely to the Forgotten storyline. I mean, let's face it, the Forgotten is all about like this difference in like growing up, disconnecting from childhood hobbies and joys and things like that, and just the general growth into adult life and responsibilities and stuff like that. I mean, there's a lot of other things that can tie in, like depression and stuff like that, but just looking at a very basic level, you know, the Forgotten is like an inner child that we sort of leave behind as we grow up and no longer are a part of Disney Dreamlight Valley for a while and stuff like that. So I feel like the Forgotten and Oswald really relate on that level. Now, That's what I think makes him a perfect character to add into the game. Now, just to play devil's advocate here, you could argue that because of his ties in that way, that actually makes him a better character to be part of the main storyline rather than any DLC content, because it's just so like samey, if that makes sense. And I would agree with any arguments for that. I think that's a fair point to make. The Rift in Time DLC is kind of isolated and stuff, but I am curious. It's, do you know what, it's one of those interesting things that, spoilers for if you haven't finished the main game, when you finish the main game, you're already hinted at or told about Act 2 and shown Jafar's shadow. Now, a lot of the outrage when the Rift in Time DLC was announced and stuff like that was about the fact that we were promised an Act 2 or told about an Act 2 at the end of the main storyline. And we all assumed that was going to be a part of the main story. Like, it wasn't going to be a DLC specific storyline. It was going to be a main content storyline. That's how it reads, kind of thing. They never explicitly said that or anything like that. But to me, if you have a main storyline and then put Act 2, implying like to be continued, I would assume that would follow on from the main story, and I guess my assumption would be that you wouldn't have to pay extra for it, that it'd be a separate thing and stuff like that. Yeah, you see Jafar's shadow. So I think a lot of people were kind of expecting Jafar to be like free content stuff. Especially when you, like, I think a lot of people, and myself included, are kind of expecting the storyline to continue. And I'm genuinely at the point of thinking maybe it's not. Maybe we're not actually gonna have any main storyline stuff. Like, because it's odd that it has been very much forgotten about. If you have finished the end of the game, you are aware this stuff with Skull Rock. I do wonder if Skull Rock's going to be another DLC, like paid for DLC. I mean, this is all speculation into things that aren't really relevant to this discussion, but like, I just have a lot of thoughts, I guess you could say, as to the future of Disney Dreamlight Valley and the storyline. I really thought that Jafar was going to be the next step in the main story. I thought, like, if we did get DLC stuff, that any DLC stuff would be like not referenced, have no ties and stuff like that, if that makes sense. But yeah, anyway, I am digressing and moving across from the topic, I guess. But yeah, so I guess in the sense that Jafar was linked to the main storyline, having Oswald in the DLC wouldn't be too far of a stretch. To kind of have him appear as a character there, I think that makes sense. And then the last thing that I think I want to talk about is the fact that is the spark of imagination. So we know this is only on one of the roadmap images, it's not on both of them. So the title or the section of this is called the Spark of Imagination. Now this is most often linked to Figment, but I do want to see or reference a bit of a tie-in that I think could apply. As much as people, make ties for Lucky as a reference to Figment, I think this could very much be a reference to Oswald too. So the reason why I think Spark of Imagination could also apply to Oswald is the fact that he is Walt's first creation. He's the spark. He's the beginning of everything. Effectively, without Oswald and the history of Oswald and everything that happened, there wouldn't be a Mickey. Like, it's weird to think that if things hadn't gone the way they're gone and stuff like that, all the Mickey merchandise and stuff like that. Imagine if that was all just Oswald. Imagine that alternate reality. Like, that's just wild to think about. But yeah, I would argue that, you know, Oswald can be the spark of imagination. He's the start of, you know, Walt's creations, the whole Disney universe in a sense. So I do think, you know, as much as you can tie Lucky with Figment, I think you can tie Spark of Imagination with Oswald. I do think the main like factors and the main theories and ties to that or ties to my theory of it being Oswald is the lucky part. I think it's like such a clear indicator, and like I said before, you know, Game Lost hints are really sort of on the nose. They're not that riddly. They're very obvious. They're very blatant. Which is why when I talked about in one of my first roadmap videos, I mentioned Oswald and I also mentioned Lucky the Dalmatian. But obviously I definitely don't think it's Lucky the Dalmatian. It would be odd to bring in Lucky and not have like Pongo and Purdy. Like that's a whole other thing. Like that. So I think because of that, it has to be Oswald. So I guess that's my main theories and reasoning for Oswald. I'd be very intrigued to see what you guys think of this. But why don't we do a bit of talking about Figment? Now, I do have to stress I don't know much about Figment. Figment is basically a character that was created for the parks, and I don't have a lot of knowledge about the parks. Now, going to the Disney parks is very expensive. I basically grew up in like poverty and stuff. It's so awkward to say, but yeah, I don't come from money. I mean, you could argue that my parents had money when they were younger, like their parents had money, but certainly me as a child, I didn't have a lot of money. Going to the parks was something that was just going to be impossible. Still as a grown adult, I feel like it would be impossible. I mean, I could potentially do it. It would take years and years of saving, of not spending any money and stuff like that, because it's just so expensive. I really don't understand how people do it on the regular. I mean, I guess you really have to live close by to make it worthwhile. If you don't live close by, I guess then it's different. Kettle of fish. Is that the saying, kettle of fish? But yeah, like yeah, so basically when it comes to park stuff, my knowledge is really lacking. I I tend to avoid a lot of park stuff, I guess, because it does, I don't want to say jealousy, but like a bit of envy. Like it makes me kind of sad looking into park stuff and everything, knowing that I'll probably never get to experience that, especially as a massive Disney fan. Like, it's gutting to know that there's something that you would never be able to experience because it's just not very accessible. So I don't tend to look into park stuff, look it up. I don't, you know, I'm sure if I got to experience Disneyland or Disney World, I'd probably get more into it, but I tend to avoid any kind of like park specific stuff because it just makes you a bit envious. It makes you a bit sad and stuff for knowing that you're going to miss out and everything like that. So my parks knowledge is really, really lacking. But basically, when it comes to Figment, Figment is basically this character. He's basically his name comes from the idea of like figment of the imagination or something. Like he's all to do with imagination. Which is why everyone believes that when it comes to the spark of imagination reference, it's Figment, because his literal tie-in is to the spark of imagination. I do believe that's the name of the song. that plays, which again, I guess you could say is pretty on the nose, pretty on the money in terms of game loft referencing stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of arguments, I guess, it could be tied to Figment in terms of like his character and the fact that he has that song. Oh, it's One Little Spark, that's what it's called. And that's the theme song to Journey into Imagination, which is an Epcot attraction. So yeah, that's his kind of ties in terms of the imagination theory. And the line in the song is something about a spark of imagination being at the heart of all creation. So that's where it kind of ties into Figment. Jafar does reference in-game the spark of imagination. So again, that leans heavily to Figment. I do want to specify that, like, in terms of like the roadmap, I feel like he ties to the spark of imagination part very specifically. But when you look at the alternative roadmap, like that just focuses on the lucky villager, I think it's a real stretch to tie Figment to Lucky. I think it's about as much of a stretch as when people say that Aladdin is lucky or Genie is lucky because of the whole wishes thing. I just think that's too far of a stretch, personally. Now, obviously, Figment does have his own references in game. We have the motif, as you can see behind me. We do also have Figment on this shirt that I'm wearing, but also we have the Figment topiary, which came with the park Star Path items. So, you know, there's a lot of references here to Figment already in game. So again, he's got like a presence as much as Oswald has. In fact, you could argue more because he does have this topiary item. So yeah, I think there is a lot of references to Figment. Another reason why it could be Figment is the fact that I feel like with this game, with Disney Dreamlight Valley, Gameloft do tend to heavily lean into park concepts. Obviously, we have the park items, the rides, house skins, whatever. We also have in the Rift in Time DLC, in the middle of the map, well, I say in the middle of the map, it's technically in the Wild Tangle, we actually have Miss Tilly. Now, Miss Tilly is a boat that's tied to an area in the parks. I forget what area. Again, you can see my parks knowledge is seriously lacking here. But either way, I guess the point is that Gameloft do tie in heavily a lot of stuff to park stuff. So seeing a parks related character come into the game would make total sense. Now, part of me is hoping that it's not Figment because I do, as you're all well aware, I don't have a lot of knowledge with Figment. I don't know much about him. I just have no ties to him. Whereas I do have ties to Oswald, if that makes sense. Epic Mickey, I love the Epic Mickey games. I think they were so good. And I know a lot more about Oswald as well, like in terms of like this is gonna sound maybe a bit like obsessed and nerdy. When I did my uni stuff, and I did like a joint film and media with English kind of degree. It was a joint honours. So when it came to like the film media aspect of it, anytime that I could do some piece and link it to Disney, I absolutely would. My dissertation was on Disney and Ghibli, so and it was about like the representation of women and stuff like that. I really wanted to make my dissertation longer, but actually when I did my dissertation, they were trialing a thing where they were cutting down the length of words for a dissertation, and I actually had to cut so much stuff out of my dissertation because my dissertation ended up being closer to the length that the dissertations normally were in terms of words. Like, I don't remember if it was like 10,000 words was the normal length, and then they were trialing cutting it down to like 5,000 or something. I don't remember. But yeah, so it was a bit of a nightmare actually editing that. But so many pieces of work that I did for uni, I tied into Disney. So I remember studying a lot about Disney and obviously his origins in terms of like the creation of Oswald and stuff like that. So, like, obviously, I just feel like my knowledge of Oswald is better, and for that reason, he's a character I want more. Whereas when Figment comes in, I'm gonna have no attachment, if that makes sense, because I don't know much about him. I did a brief bit of research obviously before doing this video, because I had to look into why Oswald was a contender and things like that. So I have that, but again, I just don't have that emotional investment, if that makes sense. So I hope it's Oswald. I think there's a lot of arguments for Oswald. I think there's a lot of arguments for Figment. As much as I don't want to admit it, there is a lot of arguments for Figment. I can totally see him adding Figment to the game. My hope is that it's going to be Oswald though. And I feel like it just felt more over for it to be Oswald. But again, some of that could just be because I don't know so much about Figment, and that it's harder for me to make that connection and tie. Obviously Figment is in Speedstorm as well. I do want to mention that because I mentioned it with Oswald, so I should probably also mention it with Figment, that he's also in that. So again, there's a tie that way. But yeah, I don't know. I think maybe it's kind of like my own personal bias getting in the way that I would rather have Oswald. I just feel like Oswald's just a stronger contender, and I do think it's really interesting that Gameloft have both of these roadmaps, and only one references the spark of imagination. Like, why are they trying to hide that aspect to kind of like throw us off? Or is it that, like I said when arguing about Oswald, that basically that aspect isn't really important? The important part is the lucky villager, in which case, if the lucky villager is the more important aspect, I believe that heavily more like links to Oswald than it does Figment. I definitely do agree that the spark of imagination probably leans a bit more heavily towards Figment, even though you can absolutely apply it to Oswald. I feel like this one's a really tough one. I feel like it's not so like clear cut as to what villager we're going to be getting. When they did the riddle for Vanellope coming, I felt like it was obvious. It felt so blatant and stuff like that, that I really didn't see it being Cinderella at all. Whereas with this one, I am really torn. I have heard a lot of the theories about Figment, and I think they're really strong arguments, don't get me wrong. But yeah, I think my main bias is that I want it to be Oswald. But yeah, let me know in the comments down below. Do you think it's going to be Oswald? Do you think it's going to be Figment? Do you have an entirely different theory? If you do, I hate to say it, but I'm not agreeing with you. I'm so sorry. I can't agree. I literally can't agree. I think the two and only contenders are Oswald and Figment. It's one of those. Honestly, if it's anyone other than Oswald or Figment, I'll do a public apology. My public apology. I have to apologize. I was wrong. You were all right. We were an idiot. I don't know why I said we. But yeah. I do think it's definitely between these two. I don't think it could be anyone else. and I am excited. I think we're going to get some more hints. Maybe not just yet, but at least in a couple of weeks. I personally think, okay, maybe I need to do a separate video on my thoughts about when the next update could come. But basically, I don't think we're going to get any serious hints for another couple of weeks before they start dropping hints about the next update. I think the Star Path has to finish first. So that's just my only little mention that I'll make about that, because I don't want to go too in depth about it. But yeah. Let me know what you thought of this. Hopefully it opened your eyes to some things. I don't know. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And I'll see you all in the next video. Bye guys!